this feels like a perfect topic for talking for discussing in this conversation, right? Like, this is two developers discussing how they're smashing out a package somewhere, right? It's perfect. So I don't want to interrupt it, but I guess most of the people on the call are not at least aware of the context.
Yeah.
Right.
But we also only have one other topic, so feel free to pipe up later if we've still got time. But yeah, I guess what I actually wanted to, the one thing on the agenda, if nobody else has anything else they want to raise, is I wanted to just talk a little bit about the new Rtools and the Windows toolchain and things, which I guess when I posted that as something to talk about, I knew very little, and now I know just a tiny bit more. So I have a little presentation basically on things I've learned in the last 2 days. And it may be that I get things wrong. It might be that some of you guys on the call already know either everything or can tell me when I'm getting things wrong. But I just thought this might be quite useful to at least have a look at what I think they're doing and how that might influence what we do with some of our sort of more low-level packages going forward. And it might also help with Windows installation problems. You never know. So I'll just find my presentation. You should all have, there's a link to it in the Slack channel. Share the screen. Is that showing up for people?
Yep.
Awesome, excellent. Right, so yeah, really this whole thing was motivated by an issue that was posted about a week ago now on the rhdf5 lib GitHub page, and basically it just said there's an install error on the rdevel ATC, which I learned ATC stands for Alternative Toolchain. And essentially, this is the core bit of the error message that they posted on the issue there. So you can click and have a look. But basically, it says rhdf5 lib wasn't found. Maybe it wasn't installed. And then they posted a few bits of what looked like useful advice, talking about how the new toolchain uses a different compiler and different libraries and things. And that from their limited understanding, maybe there was some problem with the way it was being installed and the way I'll talk about in a bit more about the way I have pre-compiled DLLs on Windows and how that might be incompatible. So this was basically the motivation for looking into this stuff. I guess they've been trialing this toolchain now for about 2 months, I think, kind of in the wild at CRAN, but I think it's been in development for at least 2 years. And so what actually is the difference? Well, basically, yeah, they still class it as an experimental toolchain, but it's jumping from GCC 4.9, I think, is what the kind of existing compiler is and things, to GCC 8, and it also bundles with a MSys2, which is like a terminal emulator kind of thing. And you can click this link and go and there's a bit more information about it there, including downloads and stuff. But one nice thing is that because it's experimental, you can install it alongside the sort of existing 3.5 version without any conflict. You just download an exe and run it. And one thing it also provides is that you can now use Pacman as a means for installing system dependencies. So if there are complicated libraries like hdf5lib or zlib or any of these kinds of things, you can potentially use Pacman to install some of these to help you build source packages on Windows. That's the idea. It's a more flexible, a bit closer to the Linux kind of style of setup and things, along with using a more modern compiler. And so why does that affect me in particular with HDF5? And it's, well, what I assumed was because Windows is special. So basically what I actually do is pre-compile the HDF5 library into a DLL and put that in a folder in the package. And I do that once when I update a version of HDF5. I build one for 64-bit, one for 32, put them in there, and do that manually. It doesn't get done by the build system. It never gets rebuilt or anything. And that's principally because it was quite hard. It's quite a complicated installation or compilation of HDF5. It involves lots of different things, and getting the Bioconductor Windows Builder to match my setup, or perhaps vice versa, wasn't easy. And this seems to work, or at least has worked up till now. I've no idea whether this is the only package that does this. I thought there were a few others, and when I went and looked at them, that wasn't the case. So if anybody knows of another package that does this, I'd be interested to know. But it seemed likely to me that basically I was building them with the old toolset, and then now the rest of this new alternative toolchain is using the new toolset, and so maybe there's some incompatibility. That seemed like a perfectly sensible thing to be happening, and a good logical explanation for the problem. And so then I dug around to try and find out a bit more about this, how to use it, how to run it and things. And actually there's a R Windows issues section on GitHub for things that are failing checks. And actually there's one issue, it's supposed to be one issue per package, and then there's one separate issue for a load of Bioconductor packages, which all are kind of things that distribute libraries. So there's the zlib BioC, rhds lib, protobuf lib, which I've never actually heard of before, and then rhdf5 lib. And they're all listed in there with very little information about what's going wrong with them. And basically nothing had actually happened there since August of last year until yesterday, when I basically posted saying something like, I never knew this existed, I'm going to have a look at it later. And then we've actually been having a bit of a discussion there with Jerome, I've forgotten his surname, but he is spearheading the Rtools for kind of efforts, and has been very helpful in the last couple of days with talking to me. But basically, that looks like a place to go and have a look if you think your package might be listed as something that's failing. And so then, having sort of found that, I was like, right, definitely need to look into this if there's loads of our packages that might potentially not be working going forwards. It turns out, actually, it's really straightforward to try and work with the new tool chain. So basically, there's a distribution of RDevel that they've made some small modifications to, which is now called RTesting, and you can just download an exe and install it. And that seems to work fine. It basically automatically sets everything up to work with the new version of Rtools. And that's actually, for me, it worked absolutely fine. I can run it side by side with the existing RDevel and also with R3.6. And it all seems to work quite nicely, and each one picks the correct version of compilers and that kind of thing. So if you want to try and at least test this on your own local machine and things, this is it's not too hard to experiment with these things. And so having done that, it actually turns out that this might have been a false positive, false negative, not sure which way around that would be, but rhdf5 lib is actually fine. So I ran it through, and I could build it on both architectures, and I could make packages which depended upon it also install and run all their tests, and everything seemed to be fine. So I was a bit confused by this. And then basically I contacted the guys in spearheading the sort of our Windows thing. And it turns out that really I should have taken the error message completely literally. So when it said it was not found on this architecture, it genuinely just wasn't being built for the 32-bit version of Windows. And so actually by adding this just wasn't happening with the new CRAN build, basically. And so hopefully by just adding this merge multi-arc argument, which is what we do at Bioconductor anyway, this should just fix the issue. So it was kind of it was a problem at their end rather than at my end in this case, which was a simpler solution than I was expecting to come across. But it's also been really quite interesting to look into this stuff. So from my point of view, that's there's not too much work required if I don't want to commit to it. But I think there's a few questions about where maybe we could do things slightly differently. So one thing I actually came across whilst looking into this, and it's run by the same guy, is this rwinlib. So there's a GitHub repository called this, which is static libraries that have basically already been built on Windows, and they're just hosted on GitHub, which is exactly pretty much what I do with RHDF5, but instead of bundling it into a package, you put it on GitHub. And I don't really know how to make use of these. There's about 30 packages hosted there at the moment, or 30 libraries hosted there at the moment. But one of the comments to me was basically, it said, these packages automatically download binaries from rwinlib, and I put the static libs in these corresponding folder names. So I don't know how this automatic download occurs. I'm not sure if it's distinct from Pacman or it happens during package installation. It's something I kind of want to look into how that works. But if CRAN are using an alternative mechanism for distributing these kinds of system libraries in a way that's at least they have some control over what version is being used and that sort of thing, maybe this is actually a mechanism for getting rid of some of our sort of library packages that distribute these system libraries. If there's now a centralized repository that sort of works with all packages, maybe that streamlines this effort. And so, yeah, really my question is, like, do we actually need to do anything? So I guess fundamentally, should Bioconductor or the build system or some equivalent of that at least try experimenting with using the new toolchain to run the kind of builds that we do normally? And I think from these conversations that CRAN might actually already be doing this, at least for the moment, building all of the Bioconductor packages, but I have no idea how to go and look at their logs and see whether that's working and that kind of thing. Maybe somebody already knows that that exists, but it might be that we don't need to duplicate that effort in the short term if somebody else is doing it already. And then also, yeah, would any of our library packages be more flexible or retired if we use some of these rwinlib things? So we might make some of them easier to install on either our own software systems or other people's, if we can kind of use these rwinlib things to build more complicated things on top of them. Or yeah, perhaps we don't even need our own distribution of zlib or something like that if there's this existing platform for it. So that's really everything I have to present, but I'll be interested to know what people think about it.
Well, thanks for looking at this, because obviously at some point it's going to affect us. We're going to have to do something on the build machine on Tokay2 to stay in sync with whatever happens with RDevel. Is there an ETA? Is there an ETA for when they're going to switch RDevel to use these new Rtools 4.0?
Not that I'm aware of, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. More that I haven't asked the question.
Right.
They're definitely still referring to it as experimental. And this list of packages which don't build is still 10, 20 long, something like that. And I'm not sure it's exhaustive. So
right.
Not ready for prime time quite yet.
Yeah, so I need to take a look at what's going on with RHDF. But yeah, so we need to get prepared with this. So right now, so yes, it would be great if we could trigger builds on Windows that use these new Rtools, but we don't really have the resource for that, because that will require an extra Windows builder. The Windows builder Tokay2 is not powerful enough to support an extra cycle of builds with this R testing installation and this Rtools 4.0 thing, unfortunately. So we just need to wait and make the switch when they officially switch on RDevel. And then we do the switch, and then we see a lot of problems. Yes. This is one more thing that will add up to the incredibly complicated situation that we having with the developers, right? I really anticipate a painful release this time. With all those things that are going on, many non-backward compatible changes in R 4.0, and now this switch to Rtools 4.0. It's going to be tricky.
Laurie points out that we're going to get a new Windows builder, so we might actually have resources for testing.
Right, but yeah, I don't know when we're going to get it. It's going to. I mean, it's not going to be before 1 month or 2 from now, right? And so it's going to be just in time before the release to start to configure it to build the next develop cycle, right? Because we have the problem. So yeah, so this is a good point. So this is the update. Token 2, the two tokens are not going to be powerful enough. They're reaching their limits for building Bioconductor, and so we plan to acquire new hardware, more powerful hardware, and the new machine we're going to buy is going to start building BioC 3.12, so the upcoming devel version of BioC. So we're going to spend some time configuring it, making sure it starts building it starts running the builds for the next devel cycle. And yeah, it would be probably powerful enough to also participate to some to do some builds with our testing. Yeah, but at this point, I expect and I hope that our devel will have switched to Rtools 4.0 anyway, right? So we'll have to be running, the builds on Tokyo 2 with whatever they do on CRAN and whatever they do on our devel, right? So the switch hopefully will be on for that. I mean, they can't switch 3 weeks before the release. That would be insane. So hopefully, the sooner, the better. So I hope this is going to happen soon.
Soon or a long time away, right? Either one's fine. So if they really are building all the packages at already, maybe it really is worth trying to find out whether we can find the build logs or something. Like it might not be a perfect emulation of how stuff happens on our own system, but at least we might have an idea of whether 90% of the packages are failing, or 2 outstanding ones, or what. It might be worth finding out. Happy to carry on the conversation I've got with Ron about that.
The thing I'm thinking is that we could set up builds for a small subset of packages, maybe. So that would be not too much work for the builder, and maybe that's something we could try doing. If I understand correctly, Rtools 4.0 can be installed next to the current Rtools 3.5 or whatever version it is. So it's possible to have on the same machine to have both builds, right? The current builds and some other builds that use Rtools 4.0 and R testing. And that would be for a small subset of packages, like 10 or 15 packages that we choose. Maybe, yeah. I think Tokyo 2 could do that. It would not be adding too much load on the machine. Just the load is on us to configure that. and generate a build report for that. And yeah.
Yeah, my understanding is that, well, with my own Windows machine, that's exactly what I've done. I've installed things side by side, two different versions of two different versions of Rtools, and they seem to work as promised, and unaware of each other, and that kind of thing. I guess you're probably slightly more complex desktop, but hopefully the same thing.
I just pasted into the chat what I think is where ImageMagick, for instance, invokes a script that downloads the package from RLibs. So there's a little bit of infrastructure that the package author has to enable.
But actually, it looks like it does it during the package installation and just goes off and grabs something and dumps it in a folder somewhere.
Yeah.
Cool. It really is working in a very similar way to how we distribute HDF5. It's just, instead of being in a package and copied over, it goes off and grabs it from somewhere and brings it down. And what do people think in principle about the possibility of retiring some of these? If there's already a, so zlib BioC pretty much only works on Windows, right? By default, it doesn't try to install things on platforms that aren't Windows. So might it be redundant if there's another system that you don't have to look after? I don't know whether we like the control that we have to do this ourselves. It's certainly a reservation about using HDF5 distributed by somebody else. It's one of the things that I wanted was control over what version it was. But
I'm a control freak, so giving up control slightly frightens me, but
Yeah, I don't know if that could. Yeah, I don't know enough about this RWinlib thing, and if that is something that could be useful for our HTC. That's the only package I maintain that has that is tricky to build on Windows. But yeah, so you should try with HDF5, but let us know how that for you, Mike.
happy to be the guinea pig. Although I did also, for you, Hervé, go and look at what libraries HDF relied on and whether they already existed. But you might be off the hook because only 4 of the 5 that you need are actually in the RWinlib thing at the moment. It requires a bit more work to try and build that. But curl and SSL and those kinds of things are already in there. So in theory, it might be easy to the poor guy that was trying to build on the Devel mailing list the other day with you have to emulate the exact path of the builder to have things installed in and that kind of thing. That's pretty tricky, and this might make that kind of exercise simpler.
I see. Right. Yeah. The thing is, when you start using RWinlib, then because I don't think the libraries that I need to for RHSlib, so those are static libraries that I found on CRAN. So the CRAN people read them, and so they are available somewhere on CRAN in some folder that I downloaded. It was a zip file. I downloaded, extracted it, and it has a bunch of static libraries, precompiled static libraries. And I just unzip this on the Windows Builder and point R to this location, and then RHSLib finds those libraries. And I like the feeling that I'm using the same precompiled libraries that the cron people, right? I don't know if the cron people use rwinlib for linking all the packages they need to link to external libraries. For example, I know that the rcurve package links to those exact same libraries, static libraries that I downloaded on K2 and took away.
Yeah, I suspect there'll either be a really concerted effort to try and make people move to rwinlib, or we might end up with a situation where some packages link to one, some packages link to the other, and then it's very confusing, which is often what happens when we try and introduce a new solution to anything, right? There's always people that adopt a new solution and people that remain with whatever worked before, and then we just end up more fragmented than we were before we tried the effort. But yeah, I don't know how much momentum from CRAN is behind this, but they're clearly at least involved in the Rtools 4.0 and that kind of thing, right? All the links go back to CRAN and that sort of effort. And actually the current version name of certainly of our testing is named Jerome, which feels like somebody is taking it semi-seriously if they're for this.
Yeah, I know that Jeroen is interacting a lot with the other CRAN folks, and hopefully, you know, in the future they move to using rwinlib on CRAN for all their linking needs on Windows. I mean, I think this is the right thing to do, right? It's way more transparent, having everything put in one package that everybody uses. We know where it is, it's versioned. Right now, it's kind of obscure. The place, you know, where I found those static libraries is kind of hidden. You don't really know. It says you have a bunch of stuff there. Nothing is really documented. You have to guess which file to download and then zip. And yeah, it's a little bit messy, I'd say. And an rwinlib solution sounds like a much cleaner way to manage those things.
Cool. Well, I'm happy to at least have an experiment with seeing how I can get RHDF5 to work with it. And then I'm happy to try and report back as to how that goes. At the moment, I'm lucky because the version they distribute is the same version of HDF5 as I distribute. So there should be no differences between the different platforms and that kind of thing. But, yeah, I'm happy to give it a go and see if it works any better or worse than what I'm doing at the moment. In which case, does anybody else have anything they want to bring up? We can all leave the room and let Hervé and Aaron just have at each other.
I need to go. Yeah, I don't see any new posts on the Basilisk issue. Aaron must be busy right now.
No, I'm here. Yeah, okay. Well, I'll play around with doing the Basilisk utils thing. That might be the cleanest way, because I didn't want to put too much code in these configure files, because then too much R code in these configure files, because then, I don't get the benefits of R command check actually checking through my R code to making sure it's syntactically valid and stuff like that. So Basilisk utils might be the best way to go. I'll have a think about it. But yeah, you can probably expect another additional package.
Right.
Today.
Sounds good.
Great, thanks for putting this together again, Mike.
That's all right, no problem. I might actually try and put the dates out in advance, more than 3 or 4 days. I might try and write them down so that I remember which is the third Thursday of every month. I don't think I count. The 2nd of January isn't a real day.
I guess we'll.
And yeah, maybe also find out whether this is a good time slot for people. We seem to have a solid sort of 10 people tuning in, but I don't know whether there are other people that we're excluded by picking at a time. So maybe I think this is 6 months, so maybe it's time to kind of ask the community whether this works for them, that sort of thing. But yeah, thanks very much for joining. If there's nothing more, we can have well, I was going to say an early night. I guess it's not for some of you guys, but
Very early.
All right, see you.
yeah.
Thanks,
Bye.
You guys.